Hello, everyone. In a small town, surrounded by green fields and dusty roads, there lived a boy named Jack. Jack came from a poor family. His house was small, his clothes were old, and sometimes there wasn't enough money for everything the family needed. But Jack had something that money couldn't buy. He had a dream. Every morning, Jack woke up early and helped his mother before going to school. After school, he worked at a small grocery shop near the market. The shop owner paid him only a little money, but Jack never complained. Instead, he watched carefully. He noticed which products people bought most often. He noticed how the shop owner spoke to customers. He noticed how he calculated prices. And most importantly, Jack noticed something. The shop owner didn't become successful simply because he worked hard. He understood business. One evening, Jack asked him, "How did you build this shop?" The old man smiled. "I started with almost nothing." Jack looked surprised. "Really?" "Yes. But I learned to save money, understand customers, and never stop learning." Yeah? Those words stayed in Jack's mind. That night, Jack opened a small notebook. At the top of the first page, he wrote, "I will build my own business one day." He didn't know what business it would be. He didn't know how much money he would need, and he certainly didn't know how long it would take. But he had made a decision. He would not spend his entire life waiting for someone to change his situation. He would learn how to change it himself. The next day, Jack started saving. Whenever he earned money, he divided it into two parts. One part helped his family. The other part went into his small savings box. His friends sometimes laughed at him. "Why are you saving such small amounts?" Jack simply smiled. "Because small amounts become big when you don't stop." Months passed. Jack's savings slowly increased. But then something unexpected happened. The grocery shop closed. The owner became ill and could no longer continue working. Jack suddenly lost his small job. And for a moment he felt hopeless. He had been saving for months. Now he had no income. His family still needed money. Jack could have given up. Instead, he opened his notebook. He looked at the sentence he had written months earlier. "I will build my own business one day." Jack took a deep breath. Maybe this wasn't the end. Maybe it was the beginning. The next morning, he walked through the market and looked carefully at what people needed. He noticed something interesting. Many workers in the area wanted fresh sandwiches and tea during their morning breaks. There were restaurants nearby, but they were expensive. Jack had a small amount of savings. It wasn't enough to open a shop, but it might be enough to start something very small. He bought bread, eggs, vegetables, and tea. The next morning, he prepared a small basket of sandwiches. Then he went to the market. At first, nobody bought anything. Jack waited. Then one worker approached. "How much is a sandwich?" Jack gave him the price. The man bought one. Then another customer came. Then another. By the end of the morning, Jack had sold everything. He returned home with a small profit. It wasn't much money, but Jack smiled. For the first time, he understood something important. He didn't need a lot of money to begin. He needed an idea, effort, patience, and the courage to start small. And Jack had no idea that this tiny basket of sandwiches would become the beginning of a completely different life. Chapter R. The small business that changed everything. The next morning, Jack woke up before sunrise. He looked at the small amount of money he had earned from selling sandwiches the previous day. It wasn't a fortune, but to Jack, it was proof. He had discovered something important. He could create value with his own hands. Instead of spending his profit, Jack used most of it to buy more ingredients. A. The next morning, he prepared twice as many sandwiches. This time, he arrived at the market earlier. Workers were already walking toward their jobs. Jack stood near the road with his basket. Fresh sandwiches. Fresh tea. At first, only a few people stopped. But Jack remembered what he had learned at the grocery shop. He watched his customers carefully. Some wanted cheaper sandwiches, some wanted larger portions, some wanted tea. Some wanted breakfast they could eat quickly. So Jack changed his business. He offered different choices. He kept his prices reasonable. He made sure everything was fresh and most importantly, he treated every customer respectfully. Within a few weeks, people started recognizing him. Jack, give me the usual. Jack, do you have the egg sandwich today? Jack, I'll take 2 teas. His small business was growing, but Jack didn't become careless. Every evening, he wrote down how much he had earned, then he calculated how much he had spent. He discovered that many small businesses failed because their owners didn't understand where their money was going. Jack wanted to avoid that mistake. He saved part of his profits. He used another part to improve his business. He bought a better container to keep the food warm. Then he bought a small table. Later, he added more food choices. His basket slowly became a small breakfast stand. Small breakfast stand. One afternoon, Jack's friend Mason visited him. Mason looked at the busy stand and smiled. "You're doing really well." Jack shook his head. "I'm only getting started." Mason laughed. "You've been saying that for months," Jack smiled. "Because it's true." But success also brought problems. One morning, Jack noticed another seller had opened a food stand nearby. The man was selling sandwiches at lower prices. Some of Jack's customers went to him. Jack became worried. He thought, "What should I do?" He could lower his prices, but if he lowered them too much, he would lose money. Instead, Jack watched the new seller carefully. He noticed something. The new seller was cheaper, but his food wasn't as fresh. The portions were smaller, and he didn't treat customers very well. Jack decided not to compete only on price. He focused on quality. He made his food fresher. He listened to customers. He remembered their preferences. He even started offering a simple loyalty deal. Buy 5 breakfasts, get the 6th one free. Slowly, his customers returned. Jack learned another important lesson. You don't always win by being the cheapest. Sometimes you win by giving people a reason to choose you. Months passed. Jack's small stand became popular. He hired a young helper to prepare the food. Then another. For the first time, Jack wasn't working completely alone. He was creating jobs for other people. But he still remembered where he had started. One evening, he opened his old savings box. Inside was the first small amount of money he had saved. Months earlier, he smiled. That tiny amount had been the beginning of everything. Now he had a growing business. King. But Jack wasn't satisfied with simply making money. He wanted to understand how successful businesses worked. So he started reading books about business, money, communication, and investing. Every night after finishing work, he studied for an hour. Sometimes he was exhausted. Sometimes he wanted to sleep, but he reminded himself, if I only work hard, I can earn money. UK. If I learn, I can understand how to make money work for me. That idea changed his goals. He no longer wanted only a successful food stand. He wanted to build something bigger, but bigger dreams required bigger risks. And soon Jack would have to make the most important decision of his life. He had saved enough money to open a proper restaurant, Ringats. But investing almost all his savings into one business could destroy everything he had built. Jack stood outside an empty shop one evening, looking through its windows. The shop could become his first real restaurant. But could he take the risk? Okay. Chapter 3. The biggest risk of his life. Jack stood outside the empty shop for a long time. He imagined the sign above the door, Jack's Kitchen. He imagined customers sitting at tables. He imagined his small breakfast business becoming a real restaurant. But then another thought came. What if I lose everything? The shop required almost all of his savings. If the restaurant failed, Jack would have to start again from almost nothing. That night, he talked to his mother. I want to open a restaurant, he said. His mother looked at him carefully. Do you believe you can do it? Jack thought for a moment. I believe I can learn how to do it. His mother smiled. Then don't take a foolish risk. Take a prepared risk. Those words stayed with Jack. He realized something important. Kem? Being brave didn't mean jumping into something without thinking. Real courage meant understanding the danger and preparing yourself. So Jack didn't sign the rental agreement immediately. Instead, he spent several weeks studying the area. He counted how many people passed the shop each day. He talked to workers. He asked families what kind of food they wanted. He calculated the cost of ingredients. He calculated rent. He calculated electricity. He calculated how many meals he needed to sell each day just to cover his expenses. Then he created a backup plan. If the restaurant didn't make enough money after several months, he would reduce expenses and return to his smaller business. But finally, Jack signed the agreement. The restaurant opened 1 month later. The first morning was exciting. Jack stood at the entrance as the first customers walked in. His hands were shaking. Mason was there to support him. You did it, Mason said. Jack smiled. No, we just started. The first few weeks were difficult. Some days the restaurant was busy. Other days only a few customers came. Jack began to understand how different a restaurant was from his small food stand. There were employees to manage, suppliers to contact, bills to pay, customers to satisfy, food to prepare. Problems appeared every day. One morning, a supplier delivered vegetables late. Another day, an employee didn't come to work. Then the refrigerator stopped working. Jack felt exhausted. One evening, he sat alone in the restaurant after closing. He looked around. The tables were empty. The kitchen was quiet. For the first time, he wondered if he had made a terrible mistake. Check. He almost wanted to give up. Then he remembered his first day selling sandwiches. He had stood in the market with one small basket. Nobody knew him, nobody trusted him, but he kept going. Jack stood up. If I can solve small problems, he thought, I can solve big problems too. The next morning, he changed his strategy. He focused on what customers loved most. He removed a few unpopular dishes. He improved the popular ones. He trained his employees to treat every customer respectfully. Risto. He introduced a simple lunch menu for workers nearby, and he started delivering meals to local offices. Slowly, business improved. One customer brought another, then another. Within 6 months, the restaurant was profitable. Jack didn't become rich overnight, but he had built something valuable. More importantly, he had learned how to build a business that could operate without him doing every single task. Okay? That was a major turning point. Jack hired a manager. He trained his employees. He created clear systems. And instead of spending every hour inside the restaurant, he began thinking about the future. Hey, he asked himself, what should I build next? His answer was simple. He wanted to open another restaurant. But this time, he would use everything he had learned. 2 years later, Jack had 3 successful restaurants, then 5, then 8. His name became known throughout the region. People who had once watched him sell sandwiches from a basket were now talking about his growing company. But Jack remembered his past. He still kept the old notebook where he had written, I will build my own business one day. He kept it on his desk. It reminded him that success had started with a small decision. But Jack was about to discover that making money and becoming wealthy were not exactly the same thing. Okay? If he wanted lasting wealth, he needed to learn how to manage, invest, and protect the money his businesses were creating. That would become the next chapter of his journey. Okay? Chapter 4, How Jack Built Real Wealth. Jack now owns several successful restaurants. People in the town considered him a successful businessman. But Jack knew something many people didn't understand. Heck, making money and becoming wealthy are not the same thing. A person can earn a lot of money and still lose it quickly. Jack didn't want that. Okay. He remembered how difficult life had been when he had almost nothing. He didn't want to return to those days. So he made a new rule for himself. Every dollar I earn must have a purpose. Can he? Instead of spending all his profits on expensive cars, designer clothes, or a huge house, Jack kept his lifestyle simple. He still lived in a comfortable home. He still enjoyed good food. He still traveled occasionally, but he didn't try to impress people. His goal wasn't to look rich. His goal was to be financially strong. Jack began learning about investing. He read books. He talked to experienced business owners. He learned about real estate, stocks, and different ways businesses could grow. He didn't invest all his money into one thing. Instead, he slowly built different sources of income. First, he invested some of his profits back into his restaurants. He opened locations in places where his research showed strong demand. Then, he purchased a small commercial property. Instead of simply paying rent for one of his restaurants, he eventually owned the building. That meant the business could grow while the property itself became an asset. Jack also created an emergency fund. He wanted enough money available to handle unexpected problems. He had learned from experience that businesses could face difficult months. Having savings gave him protection. But Jack didn't forget the lesson that had started everything. Learn before you take a risk. He never invested because someone promised him quick riches. Okay? If he didn't understand something, he didn't put his money into it. This protected him from many bad decisions. One day, Mason asked him, "Jack, you're making much more money now. Why don't you spend more?" Jack smiled. "Because money isn't valuable only when you spend it." Mason looked confused. "What do you mean?" Jack replied, "Money gives you choices. If I spend everything today, I have fewer choices tomorrow. If I save and invest carefully, I can create more opportunities." Mason nodded. Jack continued, "When I was poor, I thought becoming rich meant having expensive things. Now I think real wealth means having control over your time, your choices, and your future." Yeah? That idea became the foundation of Jack's life. He continued expanding his businesses, but he also built a strong team. He trained managers. He trusted responsible employees. He created systems so the restaurants could operate without him being there every minute. This gave Jack something he had never had before: time. When he was younger, he had traded hours for money. Now his businesses could generate income without requiring him to personally do every task. Jack used that freedom to learn more. He also started helping other young people. Hey? He remembered what it felt like to have a dream without knowing where to begin. So he began speaking at local schools and community events. He told young people about his first sandwich stand. He showed them his old notebook, and he always told them the same thing: don't wait until you have everything you need. Start with what you have, learn, and improve. Kane. One day, Jack returned to the same market where he had sold his first sandwich. He stood quietly near the place where his small table had once been. He remembered the boy who had almost no money but had a dream. That boy had no idea what the future would bring. He didn't know about restaurants. He didn't know about investing. He didn't know about wealth. He only knew that he wanted a better life. Jack smiled. He realized that his greatest achievement wasn't the number of restaurants he owned. It wasn't the money in his bank account. It wasn't the properties he had purchased. His greatest achievement was becoming the kind of person who could create opportunities instead of waiting for them. But Jack's story still had one final chapter. Ankane. Because becoming wealthy was only part of the journey. The bigger question was, what would he do with the wealth he had built? And the answer would reveal what Jack truly believed about success. Gene? Chapter 5. The Real Meaning of Success. Years had passed since Jack had sold his first sandwich in the market. His life had changed completely. He now owned several successful restaurants. He had investments. He owned property. He had savings. He could afford many things he once could only dream about. But Jack had learned something important. Money could make life easier, but money alone could not make life meaningful. One morning, Jack visited his old neighborhood. He walked past the small house where he had grown up. The house looked smaller than he remembered. He stood outside for a moment and thought about his childhood. He remembered the days when his family struggled to pay their bills. He remembered working after school. He remembered saving every small amount of money. And he remembered the first sentence in his old notebook: I will build my own business one day. Jack smiled. He had achieved that dream. But he had also discovered another dream. He wanted to use his success to help others create better opportunities. Jack started a small program for young people in his town. He taught them basic business skills, how to save money, how to understand customers, how to calculate profit, how to avoid unnecessary debt, how to start small, and most importantly, how to keep learning. One afternoon, a young boy named Ethan approached him. Ethan reminded Jack of himself many years earlier. He had very little money, but he had a big idea. I want to start a small business, Ethan said. Jack smiled. What do you want to sell? I'm not sure yet. Then start by looking around. Find a problem people have. Then think about how you can solve it. Ethan nodded. Do I need a lot of money? Jack shook his head. No. You need an idea, effort, patience, and the willingness to learn. Money helps, but it isn't always the starting point. Those words reminded Jack of his own journey. He had started with almost nothing, but he had never stopped learning. He had made mistakes. He had failed. He had worried. He had taken risks. But every mistake had taught him something, and every challenge had made him stronger. Jack also learned that wealth should create freedom. M came, not become another prison. He didn't want to spend his entire life chasing a bigger number. He wanted time with his family, time to travel, time to read, time to help others, time to enjoy the life he had worked so hard to create. One evening, Mason asked him, Jack, when did you realize you had become rich? Jack thought for a long time. Then he smiled. Hey, I don't think it happened when I bought my first property. Mason asked. Then when? Jack looked toward the sunset. I think it happened when I realized I didn't need to prove anything to anyone. Ken? Mason smiled. Jack continued. When I was young, I thought being rich meant having more than other people. Now I think being rich means having enough and knowing what truly matters. That became Jack's greatest lesson. Success isn't only about how much you can earn. It's about what you learn, what you build, who you become, and how you use what you've gained. Okay? Jack never forgot the small boy who once stood in a market holding a basket of sandwiches. That boy didn't become successful because he suddenly discovered a secret. He became successful because he kept taking small steps. He saved, he learned, he observed, he improved. He took calculated risks. He failed and tried again. And when he finally succeeded, he didn't forget where he came from. So if you're watching this story and you feel like you're starting with nothing, remember, Jack, you don't need to become rich tomorrow. You don't need a perfect plan. You don't need to know everything. Start with what you have. Learn something useful. Solve a small problem. Save what you can. Improve your skills. Take smart risks. And most importantly, don't give up simply because your beginning is small. A small beginning can become a big future. Jack's journey began with one sandwich. But behind that sandwich was something much more valuable than money. It was discipline, patience, courage, and a willingness to learn, and perhaps that is the real secret behind his success. He didn't become rich because he chased money. He became successful because he became valuable. And when you become valuable, create something useful, manage your money wisely, and keep improving yourself, your possibilities can become much bigger than you ever imagined. Okay? Your beginning does not decide your ending. Sometimes all you need is one small idea and the courage to take the first step